Alexander Reed had everything a man could ever dream of: wealth, status, power. At only 32, he was the youngest self-made millionaire in Boston, the CEO of a vast real estate empire that stretched across the East Coast. Yet, despite the admiration he received and the endless attention from women who wanted a glimpse into his golden world, Alexander remained untouched, unmoved, and uninterested. His friends joked that he had built walls higher than his skyscrapers. The truth was, Alexander Reed had never truly loved anyone. He had dated before, of course, women from high society, models, ambitious entrepreneurs, but his heart never stirred. To him, most relationships seemed transactional: beauty for wealth, charm for power. And Alexander, though wealthy beyond measure, was not willing to sell his soul for a false version of love. That was why he rejected them all. Behind the cold exterior, however, was a man who carried an old scar, one born from a childhood filled with loneliness, betrayal, and a family that valued fortune more than affection. It was on a cold Boston evening, late in November, when everything began to change. Alexander left his office past midnight after an exhausting day of boardroom arguments and high-stakes decisions. His driver waited near the curb, but instead of heading directly to the sleek black car, Alexander decided to walk a little. The night air was crisp, and for once he longed to feel something other than the suffocating luxury of his world. That's when he saw her. At first, she was just a small figure curled up on a bus stop bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The street was quiet, the lamppost above casting a pale yellow glow on her trembling frame. She looked young, mid-20s perhaps, wearing a thin coat far too light for the sharp Boston wind. In her hands, clutched as if they were her lifeline, were crumpled sheets of paper. Resumes, dozens of them, bent and smudged, the ink fading at the edges. Alexander stopped walking. He should have kept going. He was not a man to meddle in strangers' lives. But something about her made him pause. She was sleeping, her breath shallow, exhaustion written all over her face. Strands of messy hair framed her pale cheeks, and despite her situation, there was a fragile beauty in her expression, like a portrait of quiet suffering and strength. For the first time in years, Alexander's heart reacted without his permission. He removed the heavy wool coat from his shoulders. It was tailored, worth more than most people's monthly rent, but none of that mattered. With a quiet, almost reverent gesture, he draped it over the girl's trembling frame. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. The resumes slipped from her fingers, and Alexander bent down, carefully stacking them back into her arms. Then, almost without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object he always carried with him: a wooden music box. It was old, carved with faded floral patterns, something he had kept since childhood, though he never told anyone why. He hadn't opened it in years, but for some reason, tonight, it felt right to leave it with her. He placed it gently beside her on the bench. For a moment, Alexander stood there in silence, watching her breathe. He didn't even know her name, yet something deep inside told him this was not the last time their paths would cross. With one final glance, he turned and walked toward his car, climbing inside without a word. His driver looked at him through the rearview mirror, puzzled by his silence. But Alexander simply stared out the window, his mind replaying the image of the girl on the bench again and again. "Who are you?" he whispered under his breath, though no one could hear. Across the city, the rumble of the last bus startled Emily Hayes awake. She blinked rapidly, her mind foggy, her body stiff from the cold. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then the reality hit. She was still at the bus stop, waiting for a ride back to the tiny apartment she shared with two roommates. But something was different. There was a weight on her shoulders, warm and soft. A coat, not hers. It was far too fine, too expensive. She sat up straight, confusion rushing through her. The coat smelled faintly of cedar and spice, a rich, masculine scent that made her heart flutter for reasons she couldn't explain. Her hands tightened around the fabric as if afraid it might vanish. And then she noticed the small wooden box resting beside her. Emily picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling. It was old, worn from time, but beautiful in its detail. Something about it tugged at her memory, though she couldn't place why. She opened it slowly, and the moment the melody began to play, her chest tightened. Tears stung her eyes without warning. The tune was soft, haunting, and achingly familiar, as though it had been with her all her life. She covered her mouth, trying to stop the sob that escaped her throat. Why was she crying? Why did this melody feel like home? The bus driver shouted impatiently, breaking her trance. "You getting on, miss, or are you camping out here all night?" Emily scrambled to gather her resumes, clutching the coat and music box tightly. "Yes, sorry," she stammered, nearly tripping on her way up the steps. She found a seat near the window, pressing the music box against her chest, as the bus roared into motion. Outside, Boston's streets blurred into streams of light, but Emily hardly noticed. All she could think about was the mysterious kindness of a stranger. Someone had given her warmth when she had nothing. Someone had left behind a gift that stirred her soul. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a flicker of hope. And somewhere across town, in his penthouse high above the city, Alexander Reed sat alone in silence, replaying the image of the girl on the bench. He didn't know her name, but her face had carved itself into his heart. He had rejected every woman who came near him for years, yet now he couldn't stop thinking about a poor girl asleep at a bus stop. The next morning, Alexander's schedule was packed with back-to-back meetings. His company was negotiating a billion-dollar acquisition, and the board expected him to remain sharp and ruthless. But instead of focusing on the financial report spread out on the table, Alexander found his mind wandering back to the night before. The fragile girl curled up at the bus stop, the way her fingers clutched those worn resumes, the peaceful look on her face as she slept. "Alexander," one of his executives called, breaking through his haze. "Your thoughts on the merger proposal?" He blinked, cleared his throat, and gave a curt response that satisfied the room. But inwardly he was unsettled. He had faced down competitors, politicians, and even scandals without losing his composure. Yet one sleeping stranger had shaken him. By noon, unable to suppress the restless feeling gnawing at him, Alexander dismissed the rest of his day's meetings and instructed his driver to take him downtown. He didn't tell anyone why. He didn't even know what he was looking for. When they arrived near the bus stop, the bench was empty. Alexander stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she had been. No trace remained of her presence, except for the faint memory imprinted in his mind. He almost convinced himself it had been a dream, until his driver spoke. "Sir, are you looking for someone?" Alexander hesitated, then shook his head. "No, just drive." But in truth, yes, he was looking for her. Emily's day was no less complicated. She had 3 interviews scheduled, and all 3 ended in rejection. Each time she walked out of the office trying to hold her head high, but inside she felt the sting of disappointment. She had graduated with honors, but in a city like Boston, connections mattered more than credentials, and Emily had none. Still, as she sat in a cafe that evening with her resumes spread out, she felt strangely different, stronger somehow. The coat draped over her shoulders gave her warmth, but more than that, it gave her courage. Whoever had left it with her had believed she was worth helping. That thought alone fueled her determination. When she returned home, her roommates Sarah and Lily noticed the change instantly. "Whoa, Em, new coat?" Sarah teased, raising an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you finally robbed one of those designer stores downtown." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Not exactly. Let's just say someone left it for me." "Someone?" Lily leaned forward. Do you mean a man? Emily flushed. I don't know. I was asleep at the bus stop last night, and when I woke up, the coat was on me, and this was next to me. She placed the wooden music box on the table. Sarah picked it up carefully. It's beautiful. Did you open it? Yes, Emily whispered, her eyes softening. It plays a melody I swear I've heard before, but I can't remember where. Her roommates exchanged a look but didn't press further. They had seen Emily struggle for months, barely able to pay her share of rent, working odd jobs while chasing a career that always seemed out of reach. If something as small as a coat and a music box gave her hope, they weren't about to question it. That night, Emily placed the box on her bedside table and fell asleep listening to its haunting tune. Meanwhile, Alexander found himself restless once again. He tried drowning himself in work, attending lavish parties and entertaining clients, but nothing erased the image of the girl at the bus stop. Days turned into a week. Finally, one evening, fate intervened. Alexander was attending a charity gala at the Boston Public Library, a grand event filled with wealthy donors, politicians, and socialites. He hated such gatherings, but his presence was expected. As he stood near the back of the room, bored, his eyes drifted across the crowd. And then he saw her. Emily. She wasn't dressed like the others in glittering gowns and jewels. She wore a simple navy blue dress borrowed from her roommate, her hair tied neatly back. She had been hired as a temporary assistant for the event, helping with guest check-ins and carrying folders for the coordinators. She looked nervous but determined, her smile small yet genuine. Alexander's chest tightened. Without realizing it, he began moving toward her. Emily, meanwhile, was too busy checking names off a list to notice the tall man approaching. When she finally glanced up, her breath caught. The man standing before her was striking, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. His eyes were piercing, a stormy gray that seemed to see right through her. For a second, the world around them faded. "Good evening," Alexander said, his voice smooth yet unexpectedly warm. "I believe we haven't met." Emily blinked, fumbling with the clipboard. Yes. Good evening, sir. Can I help you with the guest list?" Alexander studied her carefully. She didn't recognize him. Not as the man who had left her the coat, nor as the millionaire whose face appeared in magazines. She looked at him the way she might look at any stranger, and for some reason, that made his heart ache and swell at the same time. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Emily," she replied before catching herself. "Emily Hayes. Sorry, I shouldn't be giving personal details, I'm just working." She laughed nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Alexander's lips curved into the faintest smile. Emily. So that was her name. "Emily," he repeated, as if tasting the sound. "It suits you." She blinked, taken aback by the intensity in his tone. For a moment, she felt her cheeks grow hot. She didn't know who this man was, but something about him unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. Before she could ask, one of the coordinators called her name, pulling her attention away. By the time she turned back, Alexander had already blended into the crowd, leaving her wondering if she had imagined the entire encounter. That night, back in his penthouse, Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His heart felt lighter. He knew her name now. Emily Hayes. And for the first time in years, he felt a spark of something real. But he also knew one thing. If he wanted her in his life, he couldn't let her find out too soon who he really was. Not the millionaire, not the CEO, not the man the world admired and envied. He wanted her to see Alexander, not the fortune that came with him. And so the game of fate had begun. The following days blurred into a rhythm neither of them expected. For Emily, it was the same struggle. Searching for stable work, juggling part-time jobs, and keeping her spirit alive in a city that seemed determined to break her. Yet something had changed since the gala. That man, the one with stormy gray eyes, lingered in her thoughts. She didn't even know his name, but the way he had spoken hers, the intensity in his gaze, it was like he had looked past everything and seen her. For Alexander, the change was even more profound. He found himself thinking less about contracts and profit margins, and more about how to see Emily again. He told himself it was irrational. She was just a girl he had helped at a bus stop. But deep down, he knew it was more. Much more. So he began to engineer coincidences. On a gray Tuesday morning, Emily walked out of a job interview at a marketing firm that had once again dismissed her with polite smiles. She was stepping out of the revolving doors when someone bumped into her, almost knocking the resumes out of her hands. "Careful," a deep voice said. Her heart skipped. Alexander. "Oh, sorry," she stammered, clutching her papers. He gave her a small smile. "Rough interview?" Her eyes narrowed. "How would you know that?" He shrugged, slipping his hands into his coat pockets. "You walked out looking like someone just told you the world was ending. I've been there." Emily couldn't help but laugh softly. "Yeah, that's pretty much how it feels." Something about his calm confidence soothed her. He didn't pry, didn't pity her, just stood there as if he understood. "I was heading to a cafe around the corner," he said casually. "You look like you could use a strong coffee. Join me?" Emily hesitated. Normally, she wouldn't accept such an offer from a stranger, but something about him didn't feel like a stranger at all. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "Okay." The cafe was small, tucked away on a quiet street. Alexander ordered black coffee while Emily opted for hot chocolate. She couldn't afford luxuries often, but since he insisted on paying, she allowed herself the treat. "So, Emily Hayes," Alexander began, leaning back in his chair, "what's your story?" She blinked, caught off guard. "My story?" "Everyone has one," he said simply. Emily toyed with her cup, steam fogging her glasses. "Well, I grew up in a foster home. A lot of bouncing around. Books were my escape. I worked hard, got into college, graduated with honors. Thought that meant something. But here I am, jobless, broke, and depending on leftover pizza to get through the week." She tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. Alexander's chest tightened. He knew struggle in his own way, loneliness, abandonment, betrayal. But hearing her story brought a lump to his throat. "You're not jobless because you're unworthy," he said firmly. "The world's blind sometimes, but it won't be forever." Emily looked at him in surprise. "You sound pretty sure about that." "Because I am," he replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. For a long moment, they just sat there, the noise of the cafe fading around them. Finally, Emily broke the silence with a small smile. "And what about you? What's your story?" Alexander hesitated. The truth was too complicated. He couldn't just say, "I'm Alexander Reed, millionaire CEO." That would change everything. So instead, he said, "I built a career, had success, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of life. I forgot what it meant to actually feel something." Emily studied him, sensing the weight behind his words. He wasn't lying, just holding something back. And for some reason, she didn't mind. "Well," she said softly, "maybe it's not too late to feel again." Alexander's heart gave a strange, almost painful squeeze. From that day on, their paths kept crossing. Sometimes by chance, sometimes by Alexander's quiet orchestration. He never flaunted wealth, never revealed the life he lived behind glass towers and luxury cars. Instead, he chose simplicity, walks in the park, late-night conversations in diners, small gestures, like remembering how she liked her hot chocolate or listening to her ramble about her favorite books. For Emily, these moments became the brightest part of her days. For once, someone listened, someone cared, and slowly she began to fall. One evening, after another rejection email, Emily sat on her bed staring at the music box. She turned the key and let the soft melody play, her mind drifting to Alexander. Strangely, the tune reminded her of him, steady, gentle, familiar. Then a thought struck her. She grabbed her backpack, rummaged through the side pocket, and pulled out a receipt from the dry cleaner where she had taken the mysterious coat. Scribbled at the bottom was a name she hadn't noticed before. A. Reed. Emily froze. Reed. The name sounded familiar, like something she had read in a headline. Suddenly her stomach knotted. Alexander Reed. The name clicked. Wasn't he the CEO of Reed Global Enterprises, the billionaire every magazine wrote about? Her pulse quickened. Could it be the same man? She shook her head. No, impossible. He would never waste time with someone like her. But then again, the coat, the music box, his words, his eyes, everything made sense. Emily's hands trembled as she closed the music box. If it was true, then she wasn't just falling for a kind stranger. She was falling for a man who lived in a world galaxies away from hers. And that terrified her. That night, Alexander sat in his penthouse staring at the city lights. His phone buzzed. Another invitation to another meaningless party. He ignored it. Instead, he thought of Emily, her laughter, her courage, her stubborn hope in the face of rejection. He knew it was only a matter of time before she discovered the truth. And when that happened, she might never look at him the same way again. Still, he couldn't let her go. Not now. Not when, for the first time in years, he felt alive. He whispered her name into the silence. Emily. Little did he know, she was whispering his, too. The truth weighed on Emily all night. She barely slept, tossing and turning with the music box pressed against her chest. Her instincts screamed that Alexander wasn't who he seemed, that he was hiding something too big to ignore. By morning, she made a decision. She couldn't pretend. If she was falling for him, and she was, undeniably, she needed honesty. The chance came sooner than expected. Alexander had invited her to meet at Boston Common. It was autumn, and the park was alive with gold and crimson leaves. Children ran laughing through the grass. Couples strolled hand in hand, and street musicians filled the air with jazz. When Emily arrived, Alexander was already there, leaning against a bench, hands in his pockets. His smile softened the instant he saw her. "You came," he said quietly. "Of course," she replied, though her voice shook slightly. For a while they walked together, talking about little things, the crisp air, the smell of roasted chestnuts from a vendor, the ducks in the pond. But Emily's mind wasn't in the moment. She clutched the music box in her bag, her heart racing. Finally, she stopped. "Alexander, I need to ask you something." He turned, brows furrowing. "What is it?" Her throat felt dry. "Who are you? Really?" For the first time since she had met him, Alexander's composure faltered. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. "I mean—" She pulled out the receipt with his name. "A. Reed. I saw this on the coat. I know that name. Everyone knows it. Alexander Reed, the millionaire CEO. Is that you?" Silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. Finally, Alexander exhaled. "Yes." The word hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Emily's heart sank. She had wanted to be wrong, but deep down, she knew. "So it's true," she whispered. "All this time, you've been lying to me?" Alexander stepped forward quickly. "Not lying, hiding, because I didn't want you to see him. The man with the money, the headlines, the power. I wanted you to see me, just me. But you let me believe you were someone else." Her voice cracked. "Do you know how humiliating this is? You're a man who could buy this entire park. And I'm the girl who can barely afford bus fare. How could we ever belong in the same world? Alexander's chest ached as he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Emily, he pleaded. That night at the bus stop, when I saw you sleeping, I didn't care who you were or what you had. Something in me woke up. For years I rejected every woman who came into my life because they only saw my wealth, not my soul. But you didn't even know who I was. And still, you gave me something no one else has ever given me. What's that? She asked bitterly. He met her eyes, voice raw. A reason to believe in love again. Emily's breath caught, but she shook her head, tears filling her eyes. Even if that's true, what happens when people find out? When your world collides with mine, I'll be nothing but a charity case to them, and I can't live like that. She turned, walking away before he could stop her. The music box slipped from her bag and fell onto the path with a soft thud. Alexander bent down and picked it up. His chest tightened as he turned the key, letting the melody play. The notes echoed across the park, chasing after her retreating figure. For days, Emily avoided him. She buried herself in job applications, ignoring his messages, his calls. Every time she heard the music box, she wanted to run back to him. But her pride and her fear held her back. Meanwhile, Alexander was unraveling. For a man who once prided himself on control, he now felt powerless. The board noticed his distraction. His closest advisors urged him to move on, to forget the girl. But he couldn't, so he made a choice. One evening, Emily returned home from yet another failed interview to find Sarah waving a flyer excitedly. Look, Reed Global Enterprises is holding an open career fair tomorrow. For once, they're not looking at resumes first. Walk-ins welcome. You should go. Emily froze. Reed Global. Alexander's empire. Part of her screamed no, but another part whispered yes. Maybe this was the chance she needed to prove she could stand on her own 2 feet. The next day, she went. The hall was massive, filled with eager applicants and representatives from the company. Emily clutched her papers nervously, waiting her turn. When her name was finally called, she stepped into a smaller room, only to find Alexander standing there, waiting. Her heart skipped. "What is this?" she demanded. He smiled faintly. "An interview. With me. I should leave," she said quickly, turning to go. "Emily, please." His voice cracked with urgency. "Just listen." She stopped, trembling. "I know I hurt you by hiding the truth, but I didn't bring you here to flaunt power or rescue you. I brought you here because you deserve a chance. Not charity, not pity, a real chance. And if you still don't want me after that, I'll walk away forever." Emily's chest heaved. The sincerity in his tone broke down the walls she had built. She turned slowly, tears shining in her eyes. "Why me, Alexander? Out of all the women who wanted you? Why the poor girl at the bus stop?" He stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Because when I looked at you, I didn't see poverty. I didn't see failure. I saw strength. I saw resilience. I saw a smile that could heal a broken heart. My broken heart." For a moment, neither moved. Then Emily whispered, "You're crazy." He chuckled softly, relief flooding his features. "Maybe, but only about you." Her lips trembled, then curved into the smallest smile, and when he pulled her into his arms, she didn't resist. Months later, Emily stood on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse, the city lights glittering below. She had a new job at Reed Global, not because of him, but because she had proved herself. She had found her footing, her voice, her place, and beside her, Alexander stood with the same music box in his hand. "Funny," she said, resting her head against his shoulder. "This little thing started it all." He smiled, winding it up. The melody drifted into the night, soft and eternal. "No," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You started it all, with a smile that saved me." Emily closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt at home. Because sometimes love doesn't come from riches or status. Sometimes love begins at a bus stop.